We've been reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is a compilation of every Spider-Man issue with a cover date of 1970.
Peter Parker is busy working on his Spider-Man equipment to get over seeing Gwen with Flash when there's suddenly someone at the door. It's Harry, his roommate, and Flash Thompson, who wants to talk to Peter. But Peter's got no time for talking, not with the man that stole his girl, and he grabs Flash ready for a fight. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 80, On the Trail of the Chameleon. Peter Parker is saved from accidentally revealing his spider strength when Flash reveals the real reason he was meeting up with Gwen. She was worried about him, about Peter, and thought that Flash could help explain why Peter was so distant. Suddenly regretting his actions, Peter puts Flash down and calls Gwen to apologise, asking her out. And lucky for him, she's going out to a museum today to see some priceless paintings, and so Peter will be there as fast as he can. When he arrives, he's surrounded by works of art, but Gwen Stacy looks like the only masterpiece in the place to him. He steals her away, ducking her out of the crowd, and the two of them kiss. They're interrupted by George Stacy, who doesn't acknowledge them at all, just walks away from a private room, and for some reason, Peter's spider sense goes off. That's quickly explained when a woman screams and they discover that priceless paintings have been stolen right out of the room that George Stacy was just in. And George Stacy himself is nowhere to be found. He's eventually discovered back at home when Peter, Gwen and Jonah drive back to the Stacy's house and find him there, dazed and claiming that he never left. He must have been drugged and impersonated. And we zoom across town to reveal the culprit, the Chameleon, basking in his latest triumph. And even though Peter Parker doesn't see this, he suspects that he knows who's behind the robbery and plans to capture the villain before he disappears with the priceless paintings. As Spider-Man, he swings into the Bugle and makes a deal with Robbie Robertson. Robbie is going to advertise a big transfer of bonds happening right on the front page of the Bugle, a trap baited to draw the Chameleon in. But the plan doesn't quite work. The next day, Peter Parker is there as a photographer, sensing each person with his spider sense, but he's unable to find the right person. Desperately changing tactics, he becomes Spider-Man in a cupboard and breaks into a business meeting, leaping down and telling the Chameleon that he has him, that his ruse is up, hoping that the Chameleon will panic and bolt, but no one does. And so Spidey is left grappling at the wrong person, trying to remove a mask that doesn't exist when the police burst in and he's forced to make a quick getaway. But all is not lost and the Chameleon hasn't escaped yet. Spider-Man perches on the side of the building and waits for it to clear, hoping to spot the fake amongst the crowd. And he does, instantly knowing for certain that he has his man. How does he know? Well, he swings down and grabs Peter Parker, who is leaving with Jonah. Jonah tries to protect his employee from the menace Spider-Man, but he gets knocked down for his troubles and then watches Peter Parker throw a grenade at him. Luckily, Spider-Man is there to wrap the grenade in a cushion of web, stopping any damage, and he's there to rip Peter out of a getaway car and unmask him, revealing to all that it's not Peter Parker at all. Of course it's not. It's the Chameleon. But how did he know, yells Jonah as Spider-Man leaves. And that's a secret that Spidey will never reveal. Spider-Man is racing to the train station, late to meet his aunt who is arriving back from Florida. He swings through the city, making Jonah drop his cigar, and then pushes his way through the crowd. By the time he reaches Aunt May, he's red and hot, and she frets, worried that her nephew is ill. Also alighting the train is a criminal known as the Kangaroo, being escorted by two officers ready for deportation back to Australia. But he doesn't want to go back. And so he knocks the officers down and leaps away with powerful legs. And Peter is with his aunt, so there's nothing he can do. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 81, The Coming of the Kangaroo. As the Kangaroo hides in an alley, we learn his backstory. He was a man known as Frank Oliver who studied kangaroos and really liked how well they could jump. And so he ate the same food as kangaroos and just practiced jumping until he was really good at it. But he was too good at it, and during a kickboxing fight, he kicked too hard and almost killed his opponent. Worried that he'd be arrested, he stowed away on a ship bound for America, and then he got arrested and was ready for deportation, which is where we met him. Meanwhile and elsewhere, Peter Parker is laid in bed, being nursed by Aunt May, despite feeling very healthy, and he's bored. To alleviate his boredom, he watches the news and learns that the kangaroo has stolen experimental bacteria, thinking that it was money, and that if it opens, it will unleash a plague across the city. Needing to take action, Peter pretends to feel weak and dizzy, so Aunt May puts him back to bed. The perfect opportunity for him to make a web dummy of himself and sneak away to find the kangaroo. And find the kangaroo he does, menacing a party on a high-rise building, shaking down the partygoers for money. Spidey tries to warn him about the bacteria that he's holding and how dangerous it is, but the kangaroo wasn't born yesterday, and he won't believe that the web slinger has good intentions. And so instead, they fight. The kangaroo using his powerful legs and Spider-Man being very careful not to hit too hard in case he breaks the vial. But elsewhere, Aunt May wakes Peter up. It's time for his medicine. But instead of her handsome nephew, she finds a web dummy and she faints, passing out at the sight of this creepy mannequin. But Spider-Man is unaware of the fate of his aunt. He's concocting a plan to get the bacteria away from the kangaroo. He taunts the villain into a leap, then flips him upside down and shakes him, shaking the vial loose and catching it with his webs. Then, as the kangaroo flees to fight another day, Spider-Man hands over the bacteria to the authorities, very carefully. But they mostly think that Spidey was planning to keep it if they hadn't shown up. Dejected, always feeling like the villain, Spider-Man heads home and finds his Aunt May dead. No, not dead. His spider sense would apparently tell him if she was dead, but unconscious. And as he enters the room, she starts to come around. She's confused. She thought she saw a horrible web mannequin, but she must have just been senile. Peter's right here. As for Peter, he feels terrible for making his Aunt May doubt her sanity. How much longer can he be Spider-Man until his superhero persona destroys them both? Peter Parker is miserable. He's worried about Gwen and Harry's terrible moustache, or Captain Stacy or Robbie Robertson discovering his identity, or worse, Jonah discovering his identity. And to make matters even worse, he gaslit his ailing Aunt May, lying to her about the web dummy that she saw last issue, the web dummy that made her faint. But his spirits are lifted with the arrival of Mary Jane, back from Florida, and with a phone call from Gwen. They both tell him that they're holding a going away party for Flash Thompson, and everyone is chipping in, which is another worry. How is Peter going to pay for his part? Later, he swings around in search of a crime to stop and to photograph for money, but finds nothing. But he does get an idea when he swings past a television building. He can make a TV appearance. We're reading Every Spider-Man Ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 82. And then came Electro. Spider-Man swings into the office of some studio execs, offering himself up to be a guest on a talk show. After some convincing that he really is Spider-Man, they agree and start drawing up a contract. But out in the hall there's a commotion. A live wire has got loose and is at risk of electrocuting people. Fortunately, the new electrician is able to hit a switch and cut it off, miraculously surviving when he should have been electrocuted. How was he able to do it? Well, the electrician is secretly Max Dillon, Electro, and he's biding his time to strike. That evening, when Electro sees on the news that Spider-Man is making a guest appearance on a late-night talk show and that Jonah is mad about it, Electro has an idea. He blasts over to the Bugle offices and makes J. Jonah Jameson an offer. He'll unmask Spider-Man on live television for $5,000. And Jonah loves that idea. He'd have paid $20,000 to see the web crawler get his comeuppance. He's so excited that he invites Robbie and Captain Stacy to see the show live from the audience. Meanwhile and elsewhere, Peter Parker is poor and sad. He can't enjoy the company of Gwen, Harry and MJ because he's too busy thinking about money and how he doesn't have enough to chip in for Flash's party. The TV studio wouldn't even give him an advance. After he snaps at Flash, he leaves, fearful that his bad mood will escalate, but Gwen chases after him, catching up with him on the streets. He shares some of his worries with her, about how he doesn't think he's good enough for her, that he can't take her out to fancy dinners. But Gwen says that she doesn't need that. She loves Peter, not what he can give her, and the two embrace and watch the city from a bench. And for a moment, just a brief moment, Peter thinks about revealing his secret identity to Gwen. The next day, it's time for the show. Peter gets his costume cleaned, wearing a bag as a disguise. Jonah sets himself up in the audience with Robbie and George, and Spider-Man makes his appearance. But he's barely able to answer one question before his spider sense goes off, and he leaps back to avoid an electric bolt. Electro has arrived, and the crowd screams and runs. When Robbie and Captain Stacy learn that Jonah knew about this, that he put all these people at risk, they chastise him. How could he be so reckless? Well, because he wanted to see Spider-Man unmasked, of course. But up on stage, that doesn't happen. Spider-Man dodges electric blasts from Electro and then stays in the air as he knocks the villain to the ground, avoiding getting electrocuted. When he webs Electro's feet up, Electro charges up to burn the webbing away, but Spider-Man is able to pull his feet and his hands together, short-circuiting the bad guy, but sending Spidey flying. Electro is defeated and staggers away, but Spider-Man's costume has been burned. He's weak from the fight, and no TV producer is going to touch him with a 10-foot pole after this. And he still doesn't have any money. Maybe his whole career has just been one big defeat? The Kingpin has gone into hiding, and a new mastermind is looking to take over. The Schemer. Living up to his name, he executes a scheme where his men attack a lorry belonging to the Kingpin. They want him to know about the aforementioned Schemer taking over. The gang war in the streets is stopped by Spidey, swinging down to take photos and knock heads together. But this is only the beginning. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 83, The Schemer. As Peter Parker walks away from the fight, he remembers the last time that he fought the Kingpin, when the gang leader was driven to safety by a mysterious car, driven by a woman. Imagine, laughs Peter, if that was his wife. Could you imagine the Kingpin having a wife? Well, it turns out that he does, and she's called Vanessa, and she's mad. Because the Kingpin had told her that their son was remaining at college in Europe, when in fact he was missing in the Alps after an accident, presumed dead, seen despondent before he went missing. But his son can't be dead, yells Kingpin. No son of the Kingpin would be sad, or dead. Meanwhile, at the Bugle, Jonah isn't interested in Spidey fighting random henchmen, and he pays Peter very little for his photographs. But Peter takes what he can get. He needs the money to pay for his aunt's medical bills, and he desperately wants to treat Gwen on her birthday. Why is he such a washout when it comes to money? And elsewhere, the Schemer has convinced one of the Kingpin's men to give up everything that he knows about the Kingpin's operations. The man is happy to help. It's not like the Kingpin has been there for them recently. Back with Peter, and he's with Gwen, MJ and Harry, seeing Flash Thompson off at the airport. MJ gives Flash a big kiss to wish him luck in the army, and Gwen, not to be outdone, offers the same. Flash is floating on air as he re-enlists. A little later, Peter is walking with Gwen and he's ready to talk to her, to tell her his secret identity. But before he can find the words, his spider sense goes off and he pushes Gwen to safety as a truck is sideswiped by a car and careens towards them. Gwen is knocked out and Peter holds the truck up, keeping them both safe. He can't use his powers, not with people around, but he's able to wedge a parking meter under the truck before tagging the car with a spider tracer. Medics arrive on the scene and cart Gwen away, with Peter joining her in the ambulance to worry. When she's safe at the hospital and stable, Peter leaves, swinging through the city as Spider-Man, desperate to find the people responsible. Spider-Man finds the car and follows it back to the Schemer's office, smashing through the window to confront the new villain. He quickly dispatches the Schemer's men, dodges gunfire and disables guns before leaping for the Schemer, who is sitting behind a desk. But the Schemer has schemes, and one scheme is that the light above his desk is actually a hydraulic press that crushes Spidey. But Spider-Man pushes back, gets enough counter pressure to be able to push through the plaster and into the intricate wires which explode. I'm not entirely sure why, but in the mess and explosion, the Schemer has escaped. With payback paid to the people responsible for Gwen, Peter races to the hospital as it begins to snow. He's jokey and flirty when he arrives, but Gwen is as cold as the weather outside. How could he claim to love her when he stayed away for so long? She tells him to leave, and Peter does, as George Stacy reassures him that she'll probably see things differently in the morning. But rejected, Peter heads out into the snow, feeling cold and like his life has reached a turning point. Out in space, two meteors are about to collide, causing a massive explosion that will kill all life on Earth. But luckily, the Silver Surfer dives between the two meteors, using his power cosmic to turn the meteors into dust. Though successful, he's struck by a stray piece and falls helplessly to Earth, down onto the ocean floor. We're reading Every Spider-Man Ever, and this is Silver Surfer issue 14, The Surfer and the Spider. Captain America smashes down a door to take on some criminals, until it turns out to not be Cap at all, but a TV show that a young boy called Henry is watching. His dad switches the show off and admonishes him for spending so much time obsessing over superheroes. Who would do that? Henry is sent to his room, and the boy wishes that his father could simply understand. If only he could see how amazing superheroes could be. And then he spots the Silver Surfer outside his window. The surfer is dazed from his time on the ocean floor, and he's floating through the air to try and clear his head. As he attempts to get higher, Spider-Man accidentally webs himself to the bottom of the board instead of a building. He yells at the surfer to go lower, but the Silver Surfer thinks it's a trick, and he's through being tricked, and so he keeps rising up and up into the sky. And so Spidey webs him in the face, which leads to his web getting dissolved and him falling to Earth, only kept alive because the Silver Surfer zaps a hydrant and the water blasts up to cushion Spider-Man's fall. But instead of making Spider-Man think that that was Silver Surfer trying to save him, he thinks that the surfer wanted to make him a laughingstock. Watching this all go down is Henry, who sees the surfer float towards his roof and sneaks out of his apartment to get a closer look. He watches from a hiding place as Spider-Man confronts Silver Surfer on the rooftop, finding him melancholy about humanity attacking him. Spider-Man then, he attacks the surfer, thinking that the surfer was going to attack him, and then the Silver Surfer retaliates and Spider-Man fights back, and soon the two are fighting and tearing apart the outside of the building. And so the army is called in, and with an incredible response time there is a line of tanks pulling up, as Henry discovers the surfer's board left abandoned in the fight, as the Silver Surfer tires of the fight and melts a car around Spider-Man to keep it in place. And then the army shoot upon the surfer, and he calls his board to him before realizing that Henry is aboard his board and losing his balance. And so the Silver Surfer makes a choice. He withstands the barrage of bullets from the army as he focuses his power to keep the board steady, to keep Henry safe, and he holds on just long enough to bring Henry down to Earth. And then the Silver Surfer falls to the ground as Henry runs to his father and embraces him, as the army are ordered to leave, and as Spider-Man realizes that he was guilty of treating the Silver Surfer as a menace, just as people have treated him the same way. And so the Silver Surfer realizes that there might be hope for humanity after all. There is a $5,000 reward for the capture of the schemer, which is about $41,000 in today's money, and Spider-Man could really use that. And so, despite a heavy snowfall, he swings around the city, saving buses, interrogating criminals, and freezing. But he soon learns that no one knows where the schemer is, that he moves from place to place, and so all this cold work has been for nothing. We're reading Every Spider-Man Ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 84, The Kingpin Strikes Back. To get out of the cold, Spider-Man changes into his normal clothes and goes to visit Gwen Stacy. The last time he saw her, she was mad at him for not visiting her in the hospital, and she's still mad, but also curious. Over Coco, she questions Peter about the accident, about how he survived without a scrape. There was the parking meter, sure, but something isn't adding up. But before she can really get into her question, Peter drops his Coco and flees, feigning a sudden bout of the shakes. It must be the bad snow's fault. Meanwhile, and elsewhere, we discover the location of the schemer. He's hiding in a fancy car, hidden by the snow.
But he's waited long enough to face the Kingpin, so he activates some heat in the car, melts the snow in seconds, and then races off to confront the Kingpin's men, because he beats them up first to send a message. But the Kingpin is in no mood for fighting. He's sad about his son's death and how he died hating what his father did. And now he might be losing Vanessa too, who is upset at how violently he reacts to the news of the schemer. The next day, Spider-Man continues his hunt for the schemer, moving fast to stay warm in the snow. At one of the Kingpin's warehouses, he overhears goons talking about the schemer's fancy car. And then, since no one else is driving in the heavy snow, it's really easy to spot that fancy car. Spider-Man lands on the car to stop it, but is thrown off by the speed and then dodges out of the way as the car rams him. Spider-Man loses the schemer when he drives down into the water, but he spots tracks in the snow and can follow the car to its destination. That destination turns out to be the Kingpin's mansion, where the schemer breaks in and confronts the man himself. But before any violence can go down, Vanessa, the Kingpin's wife, steps in the way. They've already lost a son and she won't have the Kingpin murdering this man. But when she looks at the schemer, she's shocked into silence. There's something about this man. But before they can find out what, Spider-Man leaps through a window, his favourite activity recently, and the Kingpin forgets his wife and the threat of the schemer to go after his spider rival. Kingpin punches Spidey across a room and wraps him up in the carpet by ripping it out from underneath him, but our Spider-Man launches a surprise punch from the inside and knocks the Kingpin down. But when Spidey goes looking for the schemer, he finds no one. It seems that the schemer has got away and taken Vanessa with him. So Spidey plans to at least deal with the Kingpin, but the big man himself has fled in a secret tube in his study, and so Spider-Man has failed to catch the schemer, or the Kingpin, or anything except a few photos and maybe a cold. In the last issue, the Kingpin battled the schemer, and the schemer kidnapped Vanessa, the Kingpin's wife. But it turns out that that wasn't true at all, as Vanessa appears from the shadows to reassure the Kingpin that she's safe. She simply hid from the violence, and the schemer is rattled. Vanessa saw something in him. Did she guess his true identity? He's so shaken that he drives his car off the road and crashes, and now he needs to repair his fancy car. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is The Amazing Spider-Man, issue 85, The Secret of the Schemer. Peter Parker is struggling to study and wondering how he'll get money for Gwen's birthday when he receives some visitors, Gwen Stacy and her father George. They're curious how Peter Parker is able to get such candid pictures of Spider-Man. That can't just be coincidence, right? They're on to him. Peter pretends to have some photos developing in another room and then uses that opportunity to change into Spider-Man, dive out of the window, and then come into the room where Gwen and George sit, looking for Peter. As Spidey, he plays it angry, saying that he has an arrangement with Peter that he gets half of the money from the photos, and Gwen lies to him, telling Spider-Man that Peter left hours ago. So Spidey makes some threats and leaves, watching the Stacys from a distance until they leave his apartment. Then he swings out into the city in search of the schemer. Meanwhile and elsewhere, the Kingpin is reading the Daily Bugle and he's mad. Why are there photos of his fight with the schemer? He didn't see a photographer, but then he spots a particular photograph that raises his ire further. Vanessa helping the schemer escape. How could she do this to him? How could she betray him like this? But she cannot explain. She loves the Kingpin, but she asks that he trusts her on this. Back with Spider-Man, and he's just discovered the schemer's car, left abandoned after his crash. But when Spidey goes inside, he discovers that it's booby-trapped and the car explodes on him. Thankfully, his spider strength helps him survive. In the snow, he spots footprints leading away from the car, and Spider-Man follows them to find the schemer, looking for car parts. Spidey swings in and fights the villain, dodging hidden blades and stun nozzles, but catches a gas grenade to his chest, disorienting him. And as he fights, he doesn't know that Gwen Stacy is worried about Peter Parker. So worried that she goes back to his apartment with her father and finds him missing. It must have been Spider-Man.
He must have returned and kidnapped Peter, and so they call the police. Back with Spider-Man, and he's made a bolo out of webs to spin and clear the gas, and he chases the schemer out of a window, saving the villain before he hits the ground. Then, hoping to claim the reward money for the schemer's capture, he delivers the schemer to the police at the address listed on the wanted poster. But his spider sense is giving him a warning, and he quickly learns why when large metal walls slam down and the Kingpin appears, dropping a magnetized net on Spider-Man. It seemed it wasn't a real wanted poster at all, but a plot from the Kingpin to trap the schemer. With Spidey captured, the Kingpin roughs up the schemer, demanding to know what his connection is with Vanessa, and so the schemer tells him. He talks about a boy in Europe who loved his father until he discovered that his father was a crime czar. And so, despondent, he disappeared into the mountains, presumed dead, needing to die to take on a new identity and using his father's money to build gadgets and a criminal empire. And when the Kingpin still doesn't understand, the schemer takes off his mask to reveal himself as Richard Fisk, the Kingpin's son. And the Kingpin reels in shock. His son is dead. His son hates him? Then the Kingpin falls into catatonia, unable to be awoken by his son or by his wife, and statue still even when Spider-Man breaks free of the net. He just stares ahead as Spider-Man escapes, leaving the Kingpin to his fate. After all, what punishment can Spider-Man deliver which could compare to what the Kingpin has been through? Spider-Man is swinging home after a fight with the Kingpin and feeling dizzy when the Black Widow spots him. She's been looking to take on a new identity after she stopped being a villain and then found herself working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and killing her husband. And Spider-Man is the perfect answer. She just needs to learn the secret of his powers. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 86, Beware the Black Widow. At Peter Parker's apartment, Gwen is worried about Peter, who went missing last issue. When he arrives as Spider-Man, he's able to grab his clothing with some web and return through the front door as Peter. He's greeted with hugs from Gwen and quips from his roommate Harry, but when Gwen asks him about the bruise on his face, he gets snappy. Why does everyone keep hounding him all the time? He apologizes, he's just not feeling like himself, and Gwen asks him to promise her something. Promise to never have anything to do with Spider-Man again. And then she leaves him until he can make her that promise. Back with the Black Widow, and she's made herself a new costume. The costume that we're all familiar with. To test it out and to find Spider-Man, she goes swinging out into the city, swinging past J. Jonah Jameson's window, who gets angry that there's another Spider-Person swinging around. And Peter is also going swinging, unable to focus as he still feels dizzy and unwell. Maybe a good swing will help him clear his head. He also swings past Jonah, and Jonah also yells at him, and then Spidey goes to visit his Aunt May, but only succeeds in scaring her as she spots his Spider-Man mask peering through the window. How could he be so careless? As he swings home, before anything else goes wrong, he's ambushed by the Black Widow, who zaps him with her sting. He falls, seeming unconscious, so the Widow saves him with some wire and is then surprised when he swings up and kicks her. When Spider-Man asks why she attacked him, she lures him close with the promise of an answer and then handily knocks him down and ties him up because he's still feeling unwell. Is this really the mighty Spider-Man? Beaten so easily? How could she learn anything from this guy? But Spider-Man has had enough, and he snaps the wire with ease and webs up Black Widow's stingers, and so she runs, now understanding how unmatched she is. She'll just have to use her own style of combat to face any dangers ahead. As for Spider-Man, he's feeling worse than ever. Is he losing his powers? He stumbles home, falling into his apartment without a care of who is inside. Then in his lab, he draws some blood to see if his worst fears are true. Is he still Spider-Man? But he just can't bring himself to look. Spider-Man is ill and worried that he's losing his powers. But when he tries to look at a blood sample, his eyes go blurry. He needs a doctor who will help, without revealing his secret identity. Doc Connors, of course! But when he gets to Connors' place, he finds it empty. The doctor must have moved back to Florida with his wife, and Spider-Man is just getting weaker and weaker. And to make matters worse, he remembers that tonight's the night of Gwen's birthday party. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 87, Unmasked at Last. Looking to get Gwen a last-minute present, Spider-Man breaks into a jeweler's, remarking at how hard it is to pull the door off the safe, and steals some pearls. But wait, what's he even doing? Stealing and becoming a menace? He puts the jewels back in the broken safe and leaves, chastising himself for almost stealing. But he's feeling worse, and he slips off a wall and hits a rooftop hard. That settles it. His powers are gone. Fate has made the decision for him. Meanwhile and elsewhere, Gwen is not enjoying her birthday party because Peter is late. Harry and MJ try to cheer her up. That man would be late to his own funeral, and they get her dancing and forgetting about Peter Parker for a while. But when the party ends, and Peter still hasn't shown up, Gwen is distraught. But then, Peter does show, delirious, with his Spider-Man mask in his hand, and he confesses to everybody. He's Spider-Man. Gwen doesn't take the news well, and Peter instantly regrets telling her, fleeing into the night, leaving his friends to remember that one time that Doc Ock unmasked Spider-Man and found Peter inside. And speaking of Peter, with nowhere else to run, he shows up at the hospital as Spider-Man. He's instantly shown to a bed and diagnosed by a doctor who doesn't even take off Spidey's mask. The doctor, working around the clock to heal people, is the real hero, muses Spider-Man. And then that doctor tells him that he has the flu, just a really bad case of the flu, and minutes later Spider-Man is bounding out of bed, excited to be a superhero again, and feeling much better. Well, until he remembers that he just revealed his identity to almost everybody that he knows. But fortunately, Peter has an idea. He takes off his costume and webs a mask onto his face before going in search of Hobie Brown, the Prowler. He has a favour to ask of Hobie, and since he didn't turn Hobie into the cops back in issue 79, Hobie accepts. Peter just needs him to dress up as Spider-Man and show up at a certain address at a certain time. That certain address is Gwen's house, where Peter arrives and apologises. He was ill and feverish and he didn't know what he was saying. Of course he's not Spider-Man. But why was he holding the mask? Asks Gwen. She wants to believe him, wants to believe that he's not really Spider-Man, but that detail isn't adding up. As Peter goes to explain, the conversation is interrupted by Spider-Man, peering through the window. He thanks Peter for returning his mask and reminds him to always share half of the photo money with him, and then he swings up onto the rooftop. And, unnoticed by the others, he removes the costume to reveal Hobie, who isn't sure what just happened, but was glad to help. And Gwen below, she believes the whole thing and hugs Peter, wishing him well when he asks to walk home. He's still not feeling well. It seems that things are finally working out for Peter Parker. But that's not the first time that we've said that. At the Museum of Natural Science, they're presenting Dr. Octopus's actual robotic arms. Sure, a radioactive accident means that he can control them remotely, but he's locked away in the Midwest, far away from New York. It's not like he can control the arms from there, right? Well, it turns out that Doc Ock can control the arms from there. He's been practicing, and the arms spring to life and wreak havoc on the museum and the crowd. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 88, The Arms of Dr. Octopus. As Doc Ock's arms escape out into the city, Spider-Man spots them and swings down to stop them. They're less responsive than usual due to the distance that Doc Ock is controlling them from, but they're still able to untangle themselves when Spidey ties them in knots, and they destroy a wall, distracting Spider-Man into saving civilians while the arms flee. Unable to figure out where they've gone, Spider-Man returns home. The next day at college, Peter is called in to speak to his professor, Professor Warren. Warren reminds Peter that he's on a scholarship, and that his grades are slipping. In fact, Peter's absent more than he's here. Is everything okay? Warren asks. Peter assures the professor that everything is fine, and then later confides in Gwen about his academic troubles. She offers to help him with his grades. Meanwhile and elsewhere, Doc Ock's arms finally reach Doc Ock in the Midwest and help him break out of prison. And nearby, J. Jonah Jameson is granted access to a private jet by his son, a jet that's flying a General Sue to the UN. The General is very important and the mission is delicate. I'm sure that these two events won't come into conflict at all. Well, until they do almost immediately. Doc Ock tears himself on board the plane, takes everyone hostage, and then realises how important General Sue is. The State Department will pay anything for Sue's return. And in New York, the Bugle News team hears about the plane's hijacking and races to the airport. That airport is crowded with protesters, some declaring support for General Sue and some condemning him. The whole situation is super volatile, a powder keg ready to explode. And when the plane lands, holding Doc Ock, General Sue and the hostages, the crowd rushes towards it, and the Doctor demands space. Luckily, the crowd also gives Peter time to sneak away, become Spider-Man and webline his way onto the roof of the plane. Using his spider sense to know exactly where the people are, Spidey pulls open the door, webs Doc Ock in the eye and clears the way for everyone to escape. As they do, he fights the Doctor, struggling in the tight plane surroundings, but he's able to get two of Doc's arms trapped in the fuselage. Unfortunately, the other two arms reach into the cockpit and start the plane, and it begins taxiing down the runway. Spider-Man is able to leap clear before the plane reaches the end of the runway and explodes, killing Doc Ock? And J. Jonah Jameson, now safe on land, is upset because no one was around to take any pictures. Captain America is fighting the Hulk. As the Hulk throws boulders, Cap blocks them with his shield, and then he jars loose the ground underneath the Hulk, making him lose his balance and fall down into a crevice. Except that none of this is real, it's just a movie that Steve Rogers is watching. The general consensus from the audience is, who cares about Captain America? And Steve Rogers broods when he hears this. They're right, he thinks, as he climbs onto his motorbike. Who needs Captain America in the modern age? And so he just drives away. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is Captain America issue 130, Up Against the Wall. Steve Rogers drives until he hits a roadblock, the police having closed off the road. Since they won't let him pass, Steve drives away, takes a back road and changes into Captain America to investigate what is happening. And what is happening is a student protest, all the rage in Marvel Comics of the time. Cap doesn't know whose side is right, but he knows that cops shouldn't be beating teenagers, so he sides with the teenagers, only to have a few angry students lash out at him when he asks what they're protesting about. He eventually learns that the students are after the dean, who has locked himself away in his office. Since the students are angry and some of them are getting violent, and since they're breaking down the door with a battering ram, Cap swings up a tree to rescue the dean and ziplines him down to safety as the students get inside and kick down the office door. The dean is somewhat annoyed about his rescue and leaves, and the protest is quickly forgotten when a TV producer appears from the bushes and approaches Cap. Impressed at how he stands for law and order, he offers to pay handsomely for Cap to make one appearance on television, extolling the virtues of that very law and order to the masses. Captain America agrees, but we learn that the TV producer is actually working for a man called the Hood, who just has a cloth draped over his head, and that the Hood's goal is to use law and order as an excuse to get Americans to distrust the younger generation, to divide the country. This was written in 1970. Captain America goes on television to deliver his speech, but he throws away his script, and instead pledges support for the students, not for law and order. America was founded by dissidents, he says, and there's nothing sacred about the status quo, and there never will be. He doesn't believe that they should be using violence, but he also takes issue with an establishment so aloof, so distant, that people are driven to desperate measures, like how the dean isolated himself from his students. The Hood is angry and wants Cap silenced, and so he hires Batroc the Leaper, Whirlwind and Porcupine to deal with the hero. But they're not great villains, and so while Whirlwind is able to knock Cap down, our hero is able to block needles fired by Porcupine, wrap him up in some cloth and throw him into Batroc, all while Peter Parker takes photographs to sell to the Bugle. The police eventually turn up and Batroc and his flunkies flee, with Whirlwind speeding the villains out of there. Cap knows that Batroc only works for the highest bidder, so someone must have sent him after Cap, and our hero wonders who that might be. What he doesn't see is that very person, the Hood, angry at his failure and vowing revenge. Dr. Octopus died last issue in a fiery explosion, but Spider-Man isn't so sure, especially when he reads an article in the Bugle about how nothing was found on the scene. Surely the Doc's arms would have survived the fire. He must have escaped death. Peter vows to find the villain, but that means turning down Randy Robertson, who invites him to a protest about air pollution. Everyone is going to be there, even Peter's girlfriend Gwen, but I guess Peter Parker doesn't care about air pollution. As Peter tries to explain himself to Randy, he places the newspaper in a nearby bin. I guess he doesn't care about recycling either. And it's picked up by Doc Ock, still alive and skulking in an alley. He's looking to get vengeance on Spider-Man, who has interfered with the Doctor's plans for the last time. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 89, Doc Ock Lives. Spider-Man is searching New York for Dr. Octopus, but the search is futile. The Doctor is nowhere to be found. He does swing past Jonah's office though, who yells at Robbie to lock the doors and the windows and call the cops because Spider-Man is outside. But Robbie's more concerned about the air pollution than Spider-Man. Apparently, everyone hates air pollution right now. Just as Spider-Man is about to give up his hunt, he spots Dr. Octopus on a smokestack, ready to smash the power plant below and plunge the city into darkness, and also hoping that this will get the attention of Spider-Man, which it does, as Spider-Man swings down and enters combat with his foe. Doc Ock doesn't waste a moment and slams Spidey off the roof, but our hero is able to secretly save himself. To surprise the Doctor, Spidey distracts him with some webbing, before hitting him in the face with a web ball and punching him down to the ground. But the Doc's arms are a menace, and Spider-Man is forced to hide behind a chimney. When the arms reach around for him, he webs them together and then leaps at them, pulling them down and pulling the Doctor slamming into a chimney. The Doc is dazed, but his arms retract, and Spidey finds himself slamming into the same chimney and then knocked down by a punch from Doc Ock. The two trade blows, knocking each other back and forth before Dr. Octopus is able to unbalance a water tower, threatening people below. Spider-Man is able to leap underneath it, holding it up with his back. Then, to stop it falling on the innocent passers-by, he slowly rises up, lifting the incredible weight and then tipping the tower onto the rooftop and not onto the streets below. But he's weak from the effort, and Doc Ock takes advantage, dragging him up with his tentacles and holding him over the edge of the rooftop. This time, Doc Ock monologues, the battle will end the only way it can, with Spider-Man's death. And with those final words, Dr. Octopus tosses Spider-Man off the rooftop. Spider-Man is falling to his death, thrown from a rooftop by Dr. Octopus. But this isn't called the amazing splat on the sidewalk, and so Spidey is able to grab hold of the Doc's arms and smash his way into a window in the building below, his favourite thing to do. The arms chase him down corridors and into vents, but they can't see him, and so he's able to remain still enough that they think that they've lost him and retract. But not before Spidey tags one with a spider tracer. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 90, and death shall come. Changing back into Peter Parker, our hero stumbles out into the street. He's feeling weak after the fight, and when he bumps into George Stacy, he has to pretend to have the flu before he faints into George's arms. Peter wakes to the sight of Gwen at her home. Gwen is keen to spend some time looking after Peter, but George notes that she won't have the chance. George has never seen recuperation like this before. Peter worries that George knows his secret, knows that he's Spider-Man, and he vows to be extra careful with his secret identity, and then proceeds to do a one-handed handstand the moment that George leaves the room. Back at his own house, Peter needs to do something about Doc Ock's arms. He spends all night studying and concocts a formula, a new type of web fluid that he feeds into his belt. Then, leaving his roommate Harry sleeping, Peter slips out as Spider-Man to hunt Doc Ock and his spider tracer down. He swings across the city for over an hour, 82.5 minutes to be exact, and his spider sense goes off by an open window. But when he looks in, the Doc's arms spring outwards and grab Spidey. Doc Ock had found the spider tracer and used it to lure Spider-Man into a trap. Doc Ock pins our hero to a wall and strikes him in the face, stopping Spidey from using his new web formula. But with his spider strength, Spider-Man is able to pull himself free and is able to hit two of the tentacles with his new webbing. The webbing is designed to block the instructions from Doc Ock's brain, and the villain finds the two webbed arms turn against the other two, and then attack the Doc himself. A crowd below begins to gather as they fight on the rooftops, including George Stacy, watching the fight between Doc Ock and Spidey become Doc Ock versus himself. The Doctor panics, swinging his arms wildly and smashes them into a chimney. The debris falls down to the streets below, exactly where a young boy is standing, and Spider-Man is not able to reach the boy in time. But luckily, George Stacy is, and he dives at the boy and pushes him out of the way, but falls under the debris himself. Spider-Man yells his name and dives down, pulling the rubble off of George. He's alive, but barely, and Spider-Man picks him up and carries him up the building, hoping to take him to a nearby hospital as the crowd below begins to murmur that all of this is Spider-Man's fault. George Stacy won't make it, and he asks Spider-Man to put him down. He's got something to say. He's worried about his daughter, Gwen. There'll be no one to look after her. He wants Spider-Man to promise to look after Gwen, for Peter to look after Gwen. George Stacy knows. He knew that Peter was Spider-Man and he didn't tell a soul, and now he dies in Spider-Man's arms. Spider-Man cradles George, hugs him tight as he promises him that he'll take care of Gwen for as long as he lives. The Black Widow has teamed up with some militant youths. At least that's what the headline of the Daily Bugle says. J. Jonah Jameson is proud of his article, so proud that he offers Peter Parker an instant advance until he learns that Peter only has pictures of Spider-Man. Spider-Man? Who cares about Spider-Man anymore? He wants pictures of Black Widow. And speaking of Black Widow, she's in the office of rival paper The New York Press, and she's not bothered by the Bugle's bluster. She believes in what the young warriors are doing, and she's going home to rest. Or she would if not for a mysterious shadow that sneaks up behind her and wraps a cloth around her face. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is Amazing Adventures Issue 3, The Widow and the Militants. At a building liberated from a candidate called Scarola, the youths are holding their ground. They're Puerto Rican, and the building was promised to a food program for their community and then pulled away. They've got no plans on leaving. Their people are hungry and they will stand their ground, especially because they've got the Black Widow on their side. But the Widow has been captured by some thugs and a man named the Don, who wears a handkerchief across his face. He plans to keep Black Widow in her home until the police arrest her Puerto Rican friends and the public becomes convinced that their actions were communist-inspired, supplied by the Russian Black Widow. But this is the Black Widow against some thugs, and when a phone call distracts the villains, she leaps up and dispatches them all with ease, tossing them around the room and launching them into the air. But she doesn't see a thug called Mario sneak up behind her until she demands the identity of the Don, and Mario knocks her unconscious. They tie her up and the Don orders his men to watch her. Soon, the young warriors will be arrested and the public will see Black Widow as a communist insurgent. Meanwhile and elsewhere, the mayor makes a public statement that he wants the warriors to talk to him. But if they're unwilling to talk, they will be dealt with forcefully. And watching this in that building owned by Scarola, the youths decide that this is all empty promises and that they plan to fight. With Black Widow on their side, they're sure to win. George Stacy is dead, and today is his funeral. Jonah always thought that George was a bit too liberal, but he was a good man. Even his political enemies have shown up, like Sam Bullitt, who's running on a law and order ticket. Although Jonah can't see that Bullitt is actually thinking about ways to use George Stacy's death to help him politically. And Gwen Stacy, George Stacy's daughter and Peter Parker's girlfriend, is distraught and blames Spider-Man for her father's death. She'll hate Spider-Man forever, but she's not going to waste time crying. She's going to do what she can to get rid of menaces like Spider-Man by volunteering to help Sam Bullitt. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 91, To Smash the Spider. The next day, Gwen Stacy visits the offices of Sam Bullitt. Bullitt is delighted to have her on board and plays it kind, offering to be a friend and a counsellor to her. After all, since he had very different views to her late father, he has no time for bleeding hearts or liberals. Gwen's endorsement will mean a lot. Without noticing what law and order really means, still focused on revenge against Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy agrees to help and appear on television alongside Bullitt. With Gwen's support confirmed, Sam Bullitt calls the Bugle to get the newspaper's support too, and Jonah is delighted, happy to support a politician who will deal with the Spider-Man problem. He's so happy that he ignores Robbie Robertson's warnings about Bullitt being a fascist still living in the 1930s. Later and elsewhere, Sam Bullitt is on television and Peter Parker watches as he publicly blames George Stacy's death on Spider-Man and vows to crush the hero in the name of law and order. And as the papers carry that news far and wide, the public begin to turn against Spider-Man. Overnight, Sam Bullitt has made people scared to leave their apartments, created a city of fear, and Spider-Man begins to doubt himself. Maybe he is a menace. After all, look what he did to the woman that he loves. Worried about being seen as Spider-Man, Peter changes into his civilian gear, but finds himself in trouble as Peter Parker instead. Sam Bullitt approaches in a car with some goons, and he wants Peter to tell them where Spider-Man is. Bullitt is going to clean up the streets, and if Peter won't help, then he's on the side of the lawless. He's not going to take a stand against law and order, is he? But Peter does, refusing to tell them any information about Spider-Man and comparing Bullitt's whole deal to Hitler. So Bullitt drives away, making his goons promise not to hurt Peter in a way where the message is very clear: hurt Peter Parker. And so the goons beat him up, and Peter has to pretend to take it, has to pretend to be hurt. But the moment that the goons leave, Peter springs up a wall and becomes Spider-Man, swinging back down to the leaving goons, scaring them, then hanging them webbed up from a wall. It's barely even a fight. He has a message for Bullitt, and he wants the goons to deliver it, word for word. And with the bad guys dealt with, Spidey swings home to call Gwen, only to find Gwen waiting in his apartment, shocked at the sudden appearance of Spider-Man, the man that killed her father. And with her is Sam Bullitt, who now has proof that there's a connection between Spider-Man and that Parker kid. At 4:37 AM, the island of Manhattan is invaded. The police fall victims to a deadly green gas cloud. Bridges and tunnels are destroyed with a giant laser, and the citizens are herded out into the streets as hostages. We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is the Avengers issue 82, Hostage. Across New York, a man with a goat's head appears on TV screens, claiming credit for the invasion. He's called Ares, and he's the head of the cartel known as Zodiac. He's placed a paralyzing force field around Manhattan, and he has captured the Avengers: Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, and Quicksilver. He wants $1 billion. Watching the broadcast,
Some other Avengers realise that they're stuck in Jersey. Watching the broadcast, the Fantastic Four realise that they can't get through the force field. Watching the broadcast, Peter Parker leaps up to help as Spider-Man before deciding to stay to stop his Aunt May learning about the invasion. But some heroes still remain. Black Panther wasn't at Avengers HQ when the attack happened, and so he looks to another hero, Daredevil, who is fighting off some kidnappers in the dark. They agree to team up, and Black Panther knows where the Avengers are being held, recognizing it from the TV screens. But when they get there, they instead find the Avengers have been moved, and Ares is waiting as a trap. Ares demands that the heroes surrender, and when they don't, he says he'll publicly execute the Avengers. Then he uses the key to the Zodiac to set the whole place on fire and sending a blast at our heroes. Black Panther leaps in front of Daredevil, taking the force of the blast, and Daredevil flees with Black Panther's body draped over his shoulder. Ares refuses to chase them. He's shown them his power, and so we cut to dawn and the promised public execution. The Avengers are held in stasis as Ares makes a speech ranting about his power and how easy it was to capture the Avengers. From the audience, a blind man rises up in protest, Matt Murdock in disguise. He stumbles forward and pretends to faint, playing unconscious until he's dragged to the stage. Then his cane shoots out into the heart of the stasis machine and switches them off, allowing the four Avengers to smash themselves free. With the Avengers free, the fight is won easily. Superior firepower is no good against Quicksilver's speed, and no one can stand against Cap or Iron Man. And so Ares gets into a jet and flees, and changes the force field so it'll begin to close in on the people of New York. But that won't stop Thor, who flies up to the jet, summons lightning and explodes the plane. And the rest of Zodiac, without their leader, are arrested. Back at Avengers Mansion, the Avengers begin to realise that all 9 of them were working on the same case, unable to see that they all pointed towards Ares and Zodiac. They talk about what happened in past issues that didn't have Spider-Man in them, and so we end with Daredevil, telling a fable about 3 blind men describing an elephant. One who has only felt the trunk, another who has only felt the tail, and a third who has only felt the body. Then he leaves, leaving the Avengers confused. Thanks for watching and making it all the way to the end. Thanks to my patrons listed here for supporting the video and the channel, and our journey to read every Spider-Man comic ever continues onwards, so subscribe to the channel if you want to join us on that journey, and also get video essays and reviews and all sorts of other Spider-Man related videos.